Push it again and now it's on.
Now it's on. Why don't I get people to calm down and get in their seats and then you can do the formal welcome.
It is, but it is bad.
Okay. Start. So if we can get you to grab your seat and welcome. Okay. We can turn it up just a little bit. I'm sure it's the best. Let me just turn up our mic a little bit. Okay. Okay, good. Started just the tech stuff so people know kind of the workings of things, and then Sharon's from the Justice Seekers is going to give the formal welcome of our panelist group here this morning. But we're so excited to see this wonderful turnout to learn about the Carondelet Village geothermal system. I know we have a couple of visitors from outside, especially a group from St. Cecilia's Sister Eggs, so they must all be Sister Eggs friends here. But we do have a few outside visitors who wanted to come and learn, and they're actually thinking about doing a pilgrimage here as a part of their environment committee at the parish. So, John, you better be good and wow them or something, I guess. With that being said, we are broadcasting so people can watch in their rooms, and we've had a number of Carondelet Village residents who asked and said that they can't be here today, but they want to know about the system, so we're recording it on the Sisters of St. Joseph YouTube channel. So if any of your neighbors said that they didn't get to see it, you can watch the presentation on YouTube today as well. We'll have our panelists give their formal presentation remarks, and then we'll do like we always do. We'll come around with the microphone for questions or comments so that folks on the TV can hear your questions as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon and she can do the formal introductions.
Thank you, Marty. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see a good group here. And we're going to hear from three people. You don't want to listen to me. You want to hear about the system here, the geothermal system. Sister Margaret will begin. She's the godmother of Carondelet Village and of geothermal. She was involved with this from the beginning, and she'll tell us a little first about how it was conceived, the geothermal system, by the sisters before the first shovelful of dirt was turned over for our buildings. And then we'll have John Victor Croak speak. He's the Executive Director of Operations for the sisters, has been with them for 35 years in various positions, and is an expert on this and knows all about the system. So, and also we'll hear from Mark Bannon, our Director of Engineering here at the Village. And he, as you know, has been a wonderful director and will help answer questions also. So.
Good morning, everyone. So how did we get to geothermal? We had, this is back in around 2008, 2009, that's the time frame. And we were planning, and we had a planning committee, which was comprised of the leadership in the marketing and development of Press Homes and the CSJ leadership at the time. And then we had a few sisters kind of at large. And then myself. And how I got into this was we knew in the process of constructing Carondelet Village that we were going to have a change in leadership. And we knew that the continuity of this project because it was a partnership. And in a construction project, you don't want any gaps or lags. You want to just keep consistently moving. So my job was to make sure that the communication channels were open on both sides. And that evolved into a lot more than that. But you know what happens when you say yes and then you find out later what you really said yes to? So it happened. Anyway, the planning committee started out with meetings with the architect to just get people's ideas and wishes, and then to put those on paper. And so when we got to the systems within the building, he brought in the mechanical engineer, and he asked, what would we like? Well, that's like asking for everything. But we said we wanted it to be sustainable. We wanted it to be earth-friendly, very much so. And so we said, and at the time, solar was popular, and we knew it, we kind of understood it, and so we asked if we could incorporate solar. Well, when we asked that question, he countered with, have you considered geothermal? Well, no, we hadn't, because we really hadn't, it wasn't on the radar. We really didn't know anything about it. So what happened to us is going to happen to you in the next half hour or so. He brought in a PowerPoint presentation. It was of a school project, geothermal, similar to what ours would look like. And it was piping under parking lots, and we had space for that. So that was how we got to geothermal. And it's also why we don't have solar. So with that, I'll turn it over to John, and he'll explain and show you how it works here.
Thank you, Sister Margaret. And good morning, both of you. Before I get started, are there a couple of questions and things in your minds that you were hoping to hear about in this panel and conversation this morning, just to gauge kind of where people are at? Anybody willing to share? Okay. Regulations. Licensing and regulations required. Okay. Future forward looking at the system and possibilities. Why we don't have both solar and geothermal. Okay. How deep does it go? The apartments are magically heated in the winter. Just how it works. All right, good. I think I'm going to hit home on most of this. So I titled this as Carondelet Village Sustainability, and that geothermal is only the beginning for a reason. There was a lot of forward thinking. Better? Okay, is that better? Okay. So there was a lot of forward thinking in this building, to Sister Margaret's credit and the original team that worked on this. And when I, as it was mentioned, in my 30+ years, starting with Sister Kevin Bopp over there raking leaves as a very young kid, and I had one of the sisters, Sister Annalise, who babysat me as a child. So I've been around with the group for a lot of years. The earth and sustainability have always been front and center with this group. So it's not like this came out of left field for them to consider the options and what they might do with a new building. And as Sister Margaret alluded to, they put down everything they wanted in the building, and sustainability was right at the top. So what does that look like? We can go all the way back to demolition of what was Bethany Convent. And there was a lot of work put into recycling the materials of Bethany and separating everything out. And you'll notice this is, the demolition of Bethany between the wings as we're building side by side. So there was salvaging of materials that happened almost from day one of the building. A lot of the materials were also incorporated into this. So the stained glass windows in the chapel came out of Bethany to be reused. We had a lot of equipment that was purchased not long before Bethany was planned to be raised that was in good condition. And we salvaged that equipment and reused it in other buildings on the province's portfolio. We took out a lot of trees. And if you know the sisters, trees are a very important and sacred item. And it was a big loss. We had some very massive trees that came out to build this building. And the trees were sent off, some of them, to be carved into bowls and other items. And I think some of those are still on display in the downstairs and in a lot of the sisters' rooms. Some of the fixtures inside of this building, if you know the bird, I call it the bird cage, but that's not the right word for it. The sanctuary, yes, in the aviary. That came from Bethany, as did, I think there's the water font downstairs and a couple of other significant pieces that could be reincorporated. Moving to design, the team wanted natural daylighting. So you'll notice there's lots of open spaces, lots of sunlight coming in, and massive amount of windows relative to a lot of places that were built at the same time. And as she had mentioned earlier, the green spaces that were put in place that serve a dual function. I mean, one, it's nice to look at something green, but it also helps on some of the heat load for the building. The construction materials, they put in a white roof to better reflect the sun's rays and cut down on heat load on the rough surfaces. Energy Star appliances through all of this. There are 3 rain gardens that serve the roof load for the watershed. One's out back, one's on the north side, and then there's a little one next to the entrance or drive over there. So that was incorporated. But there's also consideration given to the prairie next door. And there was a line of demarcation for construction going, no, you are not crossing this and we are not disturbing that natural wildlife and wild area. But there also was incorporation for solar. So in the plans and in the building, the electrical backbone is already in place for future solar and storage tank circulation piping for a solar system if it ever were to go in. So there's possibilities already built for the future of whatever that might be if we were going to go solar at some point. But the focus here is on geothermal. And I think most people understand the concept behind geothermal, right? We're harnessing earth and why we're trying to use that instead of fossil fuels to provide the cooling and heating. For Carondelet Village, we've got a couple of key components that make up this system. There's a well field, the chiller and boiler plant, the piping network, and then there's the heat pumps in your direct rooms. And all of this tied together is what makes this system work. And it wouldn't happen if it wasn't financially viable. And that's a key piece that the sisters needed to consider as this went forward. So how does this work? Well, it's all about the transfer of heat. At the very core, no pun intended, we need about 465 tons worth of cooling to cool this building in the heat of summertime. And when I'm talking about a ton, that's a refrigeration term of cooling. So a ton of cooling is 2,000 BTUs. And it's not in weight. So what we're doing is sending a thermal loop down into the ground, and I'll go into detail on this, and it's circulating the water through a closed loop system, and it's acting like a big rechargeable battery in the earth. And we're sending heat down and we're extracting heat from it, depending on the season. So think of it as a battery, and we're just sending and taking as a rechargeable battery on this system through a piping network and equipment. So where does this start? It starts underground out in the parking lots. So the equipment we're using it comes in a big tubing, sections of tubing. And what they do is they drill big holes, and you'll notice on the end of the tubing, there's a little corner here. And that's getting sent down the holes, and then it's filled in generally with grout or concrete to help the thermal transitions of all of this and keep it in place down below and protect it. And that's what starts the system down in the earth. So how do we do that? We get a big drill rig, not much different than kind of the oil fields here, except we take drill baby drill to a whole different level. So the wells on this property are down about 285 feet, so almost the length of a football field. And they just keep adding pipe after pipe to drill all of these holes. So this is what it looks like. After they're done drilling, you've got your hole, and those are the plastic tubes running down it. And then they fill them all back in. And when the well is done, you've got the little tubes sticking out. And you might be thinking, well, where are these? We don't see these anywhere. They're all underneath the parking lots. So we've got 2 well fields on the property. That one up top is on the Randolph lot. So that would be, if you're thinking about this, the link door going to the provincial house here, and that's going out to Randolph. The other one is the main entrance. This is the overhang going out into the parking lot, exiting out to Fairview. So you're parking and driving over them every day. And there are 2 well fields, north and the south, and there are 10 zones that make up these well fields. So when they're done digging, you'll notice this is the overhang for the entry. We've got a couple of pipes sticking all over the place, and that's what it looks like. That's the first step. So if we look at the Randolph well field, it's about 6 feet. You can see the gentleman here. This is the rain garden or the Peace Pole Island right up there that's still existing today. You've got the little wells sticking out. This is before they had iPhones and decent cameras. And these are connecting to these bigger tubes. So we've got a zone and another zone and another zone. So if you look at the mapping network of this, these are the zones of all of the wells under that parking lot. So when I put in a couple of markers so you can kind of see where this is in location to where you walk and drive. So this particular area has 4 zones with 69 wells in each zone. Now each well can handle about 2 tons worth of cooling. And you remember I said we needed about 465 tons for this building. And that's on a design day, meaning it's really hot out, 95, 50% humidity. It's cranking away 100%. The system will not handle that whole amount, and it wasn't designed to do that. If we look at the Juno lot, and I think Sister Antonise was here. She is. This is right outside her window and her door, right there. And that's the entryway into Carondelet Village up top with the overhang. So again, this is one zone. You've got a couple of wells tying into that zone coming together. And looking at the whole picture for the Juno lot, these are all of these zones and wells for that area. So as I mentioned, we've got roughly 172 wells down below, Each one can handle about 2 tons of cooling. So we're just about 265 tons of cooling. The building needs 465 tons of cooling. So there's a bit of a gap. What we're trying to maintain in the core loop, and this, when I talk about the core loop, this is the water that is flowing through all of the piping out to the wells and back into the building. The system is designed to work between 40 degrees and 85 degrees. So we want that loop temperature to stay somewhere in between there. Now you'll know when it gets to winter time and the ground's getting cold, we're gonna get below 40 degrees. So we need to supplement it somehow and get that temperature higher. And that happens with the boilers. And those are located almost right above us. There's 3 boilers up there that help add heat in those low temperature conditions to get that loop temperature up just a little bit more. On the flip side, come summertime, we don't need the heat. We're trying to keep the cooling or that temperature down below 85 degrees. Well, how do we do that? Almost right above us as well, there is a chiller and a cooling tower. Now, a cooling tower is it's a glorified shower, if you will. So it's got a big nozzle up top, and it takes water and it sprinkles it over a bunch of media. And as it runs down, evaporative cooling happens, and it gives up the heat and cools down. So if you think when you get out of the shower and you're wet, you get cold, that's the same thing that's happening. It's a very basic design system that works fantastic. When that's not enough, then we can kick on the mechanical cooling to supplement that and add additional cooling capacity to help keep this temperature down below 85 degrees. So that's how we manage the 2 extremes of winter and summer to keep that water loop temperature where it needs to be. So we've got the exterior components in place to keep this running where we need it. Now we got to get it throughout the whole building. And there's a whole bunch of piping going on in this building to make this happen. And a key point here that sometimes gets confused, this is not the same water that comes out of your faucets, your sink, bathrooms, etc. The 2 shall never mix. It's bad. There are chemicals and treatment in the closed loop system to help it maintain its integrity and prevent corrosion that would be very toxic if you eat it or drink it. So we don't want to mix them. And it's a closed loop system, meaning it doesn't ever get exposed and leached into the ground. It's in there for the 100 years or whatever it is designed for. So this set of piping, like I said, runs all over the building. Across from stall 43, and this is just kind of down where the intersection of the 3 parking wings come together, there's a big cage right in front of this section of piping. Those 172 wells got tied into 10 zone loops outside, and those 10 zone loops get tied into 1 section of piping. So these are our 10 loops coming in and our 10 loops going out to those zones, all tied into these 2 big black pipes that feed into the building. So they drop down under the garage floor, and they come across stall 43. And on the other side, this is the parking space on the other side of this wall of stall 43. These black pipes pop back up and they hit a set of pumps. So we've got 2 main sets of pumps. One are the well field pumps, which are these 2 right here. And then next to it is a set of 3 pumps called the core loop. And their whole job is to keep all of this mixed up and moving around. So the well field pumps, these first 2, are set to pump 1,100 gallons per minute at max capacity. And if you think about that, if we had a 1-gallon jug of water in here, 1,100 gallons jugs would fill this room pretty well. That's getting pumped every minute throughout that system, out to the field and back. Once it's done there, then we send it over to the other set of pumps, and they're able to pump 900 gallons per minute out into the building. So they're helping each other. And we don't need to run them at max capacity. They have drives on them. They're a special thing that lets you regulate them. So think of it like cruise control for your car. Some days you only need to do 30 miles an hour and you set the cruise control and it's just going to maintain 30 miles an hour. If you got a hill or whatnot, it'll adapt. Some days you need to do 70 miles an hour. Set the cruise at 70 and it does it. Well, the building network or a system takes care of all of that calculations and figures it all out for you. So it's not like you have to manually change it. So once it leaves the pumps, it goes out into the garage area to be distributed. So if you look up in the garage, you're going to see a bunch of white piping all over the place. The geothermal piping has got a couple of notes written on it, and that's to signify what's being held inside those pipes. So we've got HWR, heating water return, HWS, heating water supply, so that's going up to the boiler plant to come back down. CWR and CWS, that's the core water return and the core water supply. And as I mentioned, separate from your bathroom and kitchen faucets. So the domestic water piping is separate. Domestic hot water, domestic cold water running through the buildings. So there's a network of piping all over the place that runs up in chases to your rooms. And in your rooms, you've got these silver boxes with an air filter on that gets changed every once in a while. There's nearly 400 of them in this building. And these are the heat pumps that do all the magical work in your rooms. So inside of these is a little compressor. Think of it like a glorified refrigerator sitting up in your ceiling, usually in your bathroom. It takes that water from the system that went out to the wells and back, and it has a heat exchanger in there, and it converts it and it pumps it over to be exchanged to heat and cool the airflow going through the box. So it's like a big radiator, if you will, in your car. It's closed loop, keeps the water in that loop, but you're allowed air transfer through it, and it heats and cools and tempers the air as needed. So when the air is now tempered, then it's getting sent through a bunch of ductwork in your space, and the air is coming out of the little vents. And those little vents push the air out. The air is then circulated back to that filter box, and it makes a loop of air in your space. And so we went from 285 feet below the surface all the way up to your room and conditioned it. And that's the high-level breakdown of how that all works. But as I mentioned, as some of you know, I was raised in a family that was big on numbers and being financially sustainable. So there were a lot of people that crunched a lot of numbers for putting in a system like this. The initial investment to put in geothermal here and the related systems was just about $1 million. If you're going to spend $1 million, it had better be worth it. So the projections were for $125,000 in annual savings in energy costs. Adjusted for inflation today, that's about $185,000. The anticipated return on investment was just under 8 years. So when you're looking at building a building like this, if you're going to keep ownership for longer than 8 years, it will probably make sense. And again, this was built years ago. So I think that was your question. How does this look in the future? Keep in mind, there were 172 wells that had to be put in for this system, each one able to handle 2 tons. Well, the technology has improved greatly since then. So there are now geothermal systems. One I think was designed by a guy with the U of M. It's called a Darcy system. And they now go down to the aquifers and have a big heat exchanger that works down in the aquifers. And I was just at a meeting about the equipment a month or so ago. They're almost at the point of pulling 250 tons worth of cooling out of one hole. So we went from 2 to 250 tons, right, in a hole. And now those holes are about 12 inches in diameter, but you get the point. So instead of drilling all of these holes and needing an acre of footprint to put a system in, they now, at this one building I'm at, the building is here and the well is sitting 3 feet off the building. That's it, one well, done. So for this building, we'd now need 2 wells, and they can go just about anywhere. And it simplifies a lot of things because now you're reducing the piping, the drilling, the points of failure are really quite minimal compared to where it could be. And the heat pumps have also greatly improved in technology and design. So they're much more efficient than they were as well from years ago. So what is the impact for Carondelet Village with this? Right? Well, yes, we've got the renewable side of it, and that is front and center. And then environmental impact is reduced because we're not running the natural gas to heat and cool the place. But we also have the operational costs, right? And now that the system has technically been paid for, right, that is just savings going down the line from here on out. But it's also positioned for sustainable energy coming down the line as well. Like I said, there's already pieces in place for solar if that ever decided to move forward. But as technology changes, that might not be applicable anymore either. So there's a lot going for this building, and I think well into the future. And I wanted to end with this, because again, it often, at least from my viewpoint for the sisters, is second nature in just being mindful of the future and the earth and the impact that the organization has on it. And this is from Sister Ansgar, who passed away a couple of years ago. Was it last year? Okay, thank you. And I thought this was a fitting image because we're currently talking about the future use of the other buildings and land for the province. And front and center, early on in the discussions already, what about the green space? What about the land? How do we preserve the land and the areas around it? So it's not like, again, this is coming out of left field. It's been 35 plus years of this being known, at least on my end. But I think she speaks to it quite well in her note here on green space in the city, that every seed, every weed, every flower, every tree, every breeze, every drop of rain, every creature of the air, of the field, of the deep, all are welcomed by thee, sweet earth. So I'm going to end with that. I threw a lot at you. And I think we're all open to questions if you've got questions. Oh, we have a note.
It might save some questions. In regard to the solar in this building, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a study done if we could put solar up on the roof. And the result of the study was that it was not possible at this time because there's so many vent outlets up there. So they don't have a clear base. Too many interruptions with vents and that sort of thing. So we have asked the question, we have done the research, but at this point in time, it's not a possibility, we're told.
And again, as technology improves and the stuff continues to shrink and get more efficient, it very well could be. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. What I think I saw there on the, is that better? What I think I saw on the drawings that were shown is the future solar system envisioned, at least at the time of design, is a thermal system. That is to say, a water heating system, which would supplement the current heat, as opposed to a photovoltaic system, which would produce electricity.
I believe that's correct. And I think there's also electrical backbone for a photovoltaic as well.
Yeah. So that was a thermal system. So there are 2 types of solar system. The more common being the photovoltaic or electrical producing. But either way, if the vents would be obscured by solar panels, that's going to be a standard either way around. Also, just as an FYI for folks, right now, the energy that we're getting from Excel is approaching 50% carbon-free. And that is to say, if you take into account wind, solar, hydro energy, and if you take into account nuclear as being carbon-free, which has some controversy. So we are increasingly getting a good mix from the utility, which doesn't obviate the need for localized solar either.
That's correct. And so another, as I mentioned, the sisters have been working on pieces of this for years. I would say it was, well, that was Kathy in your term. And so we're probably 8 years now. All of the provinces, buildings, and campuses from Excel are 100% wind source energy. And we originally had paid a premium to have that switched over. Again, the costs have come down for all of that, so it's not much of a premium anymore to have that in place. But it just aligns one more piece, kind of like the pesticide-free, and using treatments for the lawn care and stuff like that too.
So if we can use the microphones during the question time so everyone can hear.
Just explain that more if you would, more detail.
Which,
About the wind and.
the wind?
Yeah.
So Xcel Energy has a program in place and has for years where you're able to proactively buy energy from a solar or a wind source. Generally speaking, within Minnesota, sometimes they go in a upper Midwest region. How they make that all work, I don't know. But from our standpoint, you can elect anywhere from 0 to 100% of your demand being sourced from those fields. Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to try and go back and forth across the room. So we'll do a question over here and then we'll go back over to the other side.
I'll let Marty do that.
I had a question for you about what percentage of energy is coming in the building here for the heating and the cooling is coming from geothermal versus this supplemental, you said wind sourced energy through Excel. How does that play out?
Well, the wind source piece is just for the province's other buildings. I can't speak to Carondelet Village because that's the utility side is managed with Presbyterian Homes. So Mark might be able to handle with that. I think the system itself was designed to handle, it was just over half or maybe closer to 3/4 of the full load on the geothermal side of it. So,
and the rest is
the supplemental. But as somebody else had mentioned, the heat in the wintertime, right? So keep in mind, you've got a unit on this side that is trying to cool and a unit maybe even next door to it that's trying to heat. But you're all drawing off this central loop. So this unit's dumping heat in to the loop and this unit's taking heat out of the loop. So it becomes very efficient because you're just transferring energy from one space to the next. And regarding why one room's hotter than the other, well, I don't know, poor design. I don't know. You got a heat load coming from somewhere there, but.
Another question, in terms of the basic geology, not every site would permit a system like this because the geology is not appropriate, but it was here apparently?
Apparently, yes. I mean, there, as I mentioned with the Sister Margaret says they did test drills. But yes, as I mentioned when I was looking at the Darcy system, part of that is a study with the geologists to look at the bedrock and where the water tables are and the aquifers to see what depth do you have to go and is it feasible at all to put a system in like this.
Okay, we're going to go to the other side to Paul there, and then we'll come back to this side with another question.
So thank you. This has been excellent. Unidos and St. Cecilia's are in a campaign to try to evangelize the city council and the mayor based on the wisdom of the CSJs.
Good luck.
I can't think of a better place to begin than their wisdom. So what have you say to the city council and to the mayor about why this should be taken seriously?
It was a lot more lucrative up till about a year ago, or even a couple of months ago. So there were, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act, a lot of incentives in place to make this happen. Whether or not they're going to be around moving forward, I don't know. But referring back to the Darcy system, it was almost a net zero cost to install that with the rebates available from the government at this point. And they also, where we have traditionally run into problems, if you're a nonprofit, you aren't eligible for a lot of this stuff. Or it's a tax credit, of which we're a nonprofit that doesn't pay taxes, so we can't magically figure that out. But they created a workaround on that too. So it is a direct payment to a nonprofit to put this stuff in. So as I mentioned, it's really almost a no-brainer at this point, given what is in place to help offset the costs on it. Whether that keeps or not, I don't know. But long-term, with the changes in technology and only needing to put in one well now, and that cost might be anywhere from $100,000 to a couple $100,000 to put a well in. If you're going to own a building for X number of years, I mean, just run the calculations. It should pay for itself to put this in. So other than that,
Money.
can't help them.
I have a slight comment to make where our church is looking at the possibility of geothermal switching over and is looking at this Darcy system. And it's a big building, actually. It's 5 buildings put together. To take care of this, it looks like 2 wells, 2 12-inch. And they said, talking with the city of St. Paul or talking with Excel, there's conversations that can help with cost. But like you said, how long is that going to last? I'm wondering if there's a way of making it happen faster somehow before all the money goes away. In our case, in this building, if we can proceed, if it's allowed, if the money is found to be available, there's talk of even expanding this into the neighborhood. Dig 4 wells, spread it around, because the big cost is the wells.
Right.
And after that, it wouldn't cost hardly anything to spread it for several blocks around the building. So anyway, it's a neat conversation, and I'm just learning about it, and I'm just learning what a Darcy system is. I thought it was a name of a system. It's the name of a company. I'm learning as I go.
Okay, let's try and move the questions to each side. We'll do one over here and then we'll come back over here.
So what plan do they have the North Heights? What's their design? The golf course, it's all geothermal. I
I
thought,
can't speak to that. I'm not sure.
So, are we on this side now? I'm thinking of the aquifers. Is that a stress on aquifers to use in that way, or will that not be good in the future?
That is a consideration to take into account. Because again, if we're starting to heat up an aquifer, we need some way to remove the heat from an aquifer, right? So you're trying to keep it in balance, just like this system, right? Think of it as a rechargeable battery. It's got to balance out. You can't just completely discharge it and you can't completely overcharge it. So yes, as we're starting to tap into the aquifers, that is a consideration that needs to be accounted for, especially with you. I mean, if you're thinking like a data center, right, where we're starting to hit, thousands of tons of cooling, that's a extreme load being put onto an aquifer that needs to be moved somewhere.
Yeah, I was wondering, with this push toward electrification and net zero, are your boilers, are they electric? Are they natural gas?
They're natural gas.
They're natural gas. So there is that emission issue. And that program Excel's Renewable Connect, because I've done it for years to offset our family's electric and gas load.
I'm ignorant on the whole subject.
But I'm just wondering, how applicable is this to spread to just any house in St. Paul? I live in the Apple Valley. Is it applicable out there? You have to have a certain geology? Do you have to have a certain number of people involved? Does it have to be a building? I'm not sure. We're talking about everybody in St. Paul should do this, but I don't know if that's feasible. I don't understand.
Well, my parents live in Apple Valley, and I could tell you right now, they will not be putting a system in out there. It's not to the scale that you'd put this in a residential house. And I mean, again, the cost is putting this well in. And so you'd really have to want to put a geothermal system in to put that upfront cost in. And there will probably not be a payback in your lifetime for one residential house to offset that. You'd be better off with just an electric heat pump at this point that would be more efficient. So scalability is a bit more cost effective. And when you're starting to look at either a multi-campus site or one large building where, yes, it's a lot of money, but in the grand scheme, $500,000 to put the well in and the equipment isn't that much of an investment when you're putting up a $60 million building, right? So economies of scale make a difference, and it just isn't there for a residential that I'm aware of at this point.
And I think the conversations in St. Paul are, for an individual homeowner, it's difficult to do this. But maybe for a neighborhood, it's a very different story. And so that's the conversation with the city.
Because if you think about it, kind of like the water system, right? We've got one well for your water from this city of St. Paul's probably got 30 wells, right? But then there's a distribution piping going to all of the little residential homes. Nobody has their own well anymore to get water out of their sink in a metropolitan area. That's only out at the farm. So it's kind of along the same lines.
John Dunlop, just a little piece of information in terms of individual residences. I think that John is exactly right. A geothermal system takes a real strong look. I mean, a lot of difficulty in making that work. However, like John says, we're extracting the heat from the earth in a geothermal system. However, an air source heat pump, which you may hear about, extracts the heat from the outside air. And that doesn't require the deep wells. And because the efficiency of air source heat pumps has increased dramatically over the past 15 years, they are becoming much more efficient. We actually still own a condo over in Minneapolis, and we replaced our entire system with an air source heat pump in our condo association, and now we don't use any natural gas. That is very feasible for people within single-family dwellings.
Absolutely. I just bought one for my house, in part because tax credits are available as well. So it was very economical to put in a heat source, a air source heat pump at this point. I still like redundancy, so I still have a gas furnace to back that up in the event it all goes to pot some winter and it's 30 below zero.
Will you please speak more to the aquifers and that source of water, so much water being used? What if the water dries up? You know, the climate change and all the things to consider there. I know that water keeps getting recycled, does it?
Right. So the water would not directly come in contact with the aquifer. So again, they're two separate systems. The aquifer keeps flowing all day long, and you just have a big radiator like your vehicle has sitting down in the aquifer. And that's keeping the two systems separate. So your loop is coming down into the heat exchanger and coming right back up, and the aquifer is flowing by it. And that's how the heat is being transferred. So they're not mixing and sharing directly. But to your other point, if the aquifer changes, yeah, they're going to have to drill a deeper well or change location for that too.
In the present situation from the time you built this and installed this, is there any differences showing up in the level of water in the aquifers?
That I'm not sure of, because ours do not go down, the wells for Carondelet Village do not go down to the aquifers. They're just down into the earth and then coming right back up. That keeps going. Correct.
So maybe Mark's been a little quiet there. We could put Mark on the spot a little. Well, system is years, every year. We know that it's reducing the amount of gas being used and the effects of that. From the maintenance perspective versus a boiler system, how much maintenance do you have to do as a maintenance person of this building to keep this system going? Just some of the coils to be replaced, they get holes in them after time. The compressors go down. So, I mean, those are the things. This is my first time actually working with a geothermal system. I've worked with heat pumps before in the past, and they work fantastic. They're a lot easier to work on than Magic Pack units. I got the A-frame up on top, and they're outside, and then you get all that cottonwood. That's a lot of work if you live in an area that gets a lot of cottonwood. So I really like heat pumps. So heat pumps are the way to go, if you ask me. Yeah, the system works great when it works. We haven't had many problems here since I've been here. There have been some things that needed to be addressed in some of the heat pumps, and we got them all taken care of. So a lot of them are just hit and miss now. Somebody may say, oh, my AC is not working. It just may need a charge, so we put a little Freon in there and we get you back up and running and cooling. So for the people that don't really understand the geothermal system, the best way for me to explain it to you, and I think I've mentioned this in the last meeting, look at it as a window air conditioner. We're taking out the heat and we're bringing in the cool.
And sometimes we do the opposite.
Correct.
It can go that way or that way. Yep.
Right.
Just Yeah, just to point to the economic discussion earlier, and something to think about whether you're talking about a full-scale building or a residential building. The economics are always better if you are building new, as was the case in Carondelet Village, or if you are replacing a system that is worn out. So it will always be better if you look at the incremental cost of a new heating or cooling system over and above what you would have purchased. The other point that I think speaks a little bit to the economy of scale here, you folks, as I understand it, have 400 heat pumps, is that correct?
It's about 400 heat pumps.
400, and how many rooms or how many units do you have?
70. Yeah,
Okay. So
270.
So if you divide that into $1 million, you find out you're dealing with about $2,500 a heat pump, all system cost included, or 3,000 and some odd dollars per room. So you can see the economy of scale there in clustering one system serving multiple end users, as opposed to a geothermal or ground source system for a single building or a single house.
Absolutely.
How many engineering firms or companies are doing this work? Is it hard to find people when you're actually like doing a new construction? So Luther Seminary has sold a bunch of land and it's in the process of planning their development, what they're going to do there. How hard is it to find people to do this work and or fix it, after the fact?
Well, I don't think it's hard at all. Anybody will fix and work on stuff. It's whether they know what they're doing, but that's all joking aside. There are a couple of engineering firms that this is what they do. And I mean, the group that we use, they're still around and working on stuff. As I mentioned, the Darcy system, the supplier that deals a lot with them, Midwest Mechanical Solutions, that's their bread and butter. This is what they do day in and day out. So it is there's a lot of people that will claim a lot of things, but yes, to find the couple that are really skilled and knowledgeable and have the portfolio to say, we've done this, right? This is not our first rodeo, right? We don't want to be drilling a hole 200 to 300 feet down. And I think we even had that with the first drill company that went out of business when we were halfway through drills. Yeah, that wasn't good. We had to find a new drill company. So it happens, but you vet it as best you can and look at their current portfolio of what they've done and then try and figure it out.
Well, as we come up to the end of our hour here, make sure we give people something they can do to continue to replicate the system in the city of St. Paul. We've got a growing relationship with Unidos, and Sharon's going to share a little ask that people could sign advocacy cards to the city of St. Paul.
Before we get to the ask, we also have talked about tours here that some of you might be interested in. So stay tuned for that. We don't have a date or time yet, but for those who would like to prowl around in the garage and look at the pipes and so forth, we hope that's coming. Meanwhile, I'd like to introduce Chelsea Darmond, the executive director, the head of Unidos, and she's going to give us an opportunity to advocate for geothermal systems.
Thank you all so much. It's so exciting.
Right there, perfect.
Good. So exciting to hear the enthusiasm and learn the story behind Carondelet Village, because we look to this example as inspiration. We're trying to get examples like this all around the city. And when we heard and started to learn more about what you all have had here for 10 or 15 years now, it's been really exciting and inspiring for us. So we are, on June 14th, we are inviting the mayor and some of our city council members to come and hear from us about how important this is to us. We are, you might be excited to learn that the city of St. Paul is planning a citywide thermal energy plan. They're looking into what this could mean. We heard a lot of conversation about the economy of scale and how the numbers work better and better the more and more people are connected. So our city is taking this seriously and making plans. But we want to make sure that they also fund those plans. That's how we know they're really serious. So on June 14th, we're inviting the mayor, and we're going to talk to him about how important this is to us. And we are, in the meantime, between now and then, sending him postcards. So if you're not able to go to the meeting, you can just send him a postcard and let him know that this is important. And all you need to do is, they're already filled out. You just have to put your name and your address, and then maybe somebody here can collect them and we'll send them for you.
So there are postcards on the table. We'll have some postcards on the Justice Resource table, and you can drop them in the advocacy box and we will get them mailed for you.
And we have some flyers too for our event. Thank you so much.
Well, I think let's give a shout out to our Justice Seekers Subcommittee on the Sustainability. For the Sustainability Subcommittee, if you could meet in the back, folks from St. Cecilia's would love to meet you and talk about possibly doing a pilgrimage from their church to come here and learn more about the system. So they want to meet folks who are doing this work here at the village, and maybe let's give a big thank you to our wonderful panelists for helping us to understand this system.
Well, I'm just inviting our visitors to see Sister Ansgar's painting that has been turned into a mosaic. Downstairs, as you go down the stairs, just be sure it's life size, you know, it's like a 6 foot, 8 foot restoration from painting to mosaic. It's right on the wall as you go down the stairs, so don't miss it.
Okay, well, if you've got any other questions, I'm sure John and Sister Bellinger would be answer some questions afterwards. But thank you all for coming this morning, and hope it's got you more excited about the system you use every day. Don't even realize it.
Everybody kindly to maybe go out to the corridor and meet, because I have to set up for the Alzheimer's.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, so the sustainable folks, and since if we could get a piano, then you could chat and get to know one another.
Really good.